Welcome back, New York. You're officially in the legal corner. On today's show, due to overwhelming requests, we'll be discussing foreclosures. Before we get started, though, I would just like to say a thank you to my aunt who recently passed away. Just wanted to say thank you for helping me go to law school. I'm here because of you, and I will miss you every day. I owe you my career.
We'd like to send our condolences to the Trujillo family for their loss, and we would appreciate it if at services this weekend in church, you can each say a prayer. With that, we want to thank our producers, Manjeet and Jasdeep Singh. We couldn't do this without you. Just some housekeeping before we get started. Everything presented on our show is for educational purposes. Nothing is to be construed or meant to be construed as giving legal advice. Everybody's case is different and based on individual facts. Please sit down with an attorney to discuss your individual cases.
New York, this is your legal corner. I'm Luis Trujillo. With me, as always, my partner Brian Levine, and we are here to educate.
We were planning on continuing our episode of last week where we discussed dealing with insurmountable debt, bankruptcy, and what to do. However, due to overwhelming response from our callers, we're deciding to shift our focus back to foreclosure defense and the litigation involved. So thank you, callers. Thanks for the input. We're here to serve you and answer your questions.
Beloved New York, you can reach us at 1-800-870-6507. That number, 1-800-870-6507. Or you can tweet us at Trujillo Levine. That's tweet at Trujillo Levine. We're also available on Facebook at The Legal Corner. That's The Legal Corner on Facebook. Brian, often we discuss a lot on the program about what we do day to day, how it is to be an attorney in this sort of form of law, if you will. But for today, we have a very special treat for our listeners. We have an actual
client
time. Interesting. And this is actually a client of ours who we have been able to help. And she is very eager to share with the world what her experience with our office was. And we're very excited to have her on the air.
This client was not just a client. She was actually a listener of this show. And just like you guys, she was listening, and she decided to be brave and call and ask a simple question, and it kind of changed her life. And, she requested to come on the air and tell the world that this stuff that we talk about is real and legitimate and that you shouldn't just give up. And we obliged and said, why don't you come on? That's a good idea, because we come on every week and we try and, inform the listeners and the public that this stuff is legitimate. You have rights. You need to enforce them. It's not about giving up. It's not about, bending over. It's about fighting, and that there are alternatives to losing your home. So I guess without further ado, Betty is on line 3, if you want to click her on, Lewis.
Betty, welcome to the Legal Corner. We are so happy to have you here, and we're eager to hear what you have to say. So what we'd like for you to talk to us about is what are the type of experiences that you went through before you met us, and what was the situation like after you met us? Please.
Okay. Prior to meeting both Louis and Brian, I was trying to get 2 mortgages modified. One is the home that I live in, and the other one is a rental home. And I think it lasted for a few years. I think I went through 4 different law firms. The first 2 were scams, so I lost my money there. And the other 2 just didn't deliver. They didn't get the loans modified, which led to foreclosure. The loans I was trying to modify because the rates were high, adjustable rates, the monthly payments were high. So I got through, like I said, I went through 4 different law firms. And finally, I heard Brian and Lewis on the Christian channel, and I had to pull over because it seems as though they were talking to me. So I jotted down the number, and first thing Monday morning, I called them. And from the very first day to the end, it was the best experience I've had. Thank God for both Lewis and Brian. Foreclosure proceedings are dismissed. I hope you guys understand out there. They are dismissed. And we're talking about maybe only 4 months later.
Thank you, Betty, for those very kind words.
Now, I also would like to add how my experience was so positive. The whole staff were very professional throughout the whole process. I never had to call the office for updates. Louis personally made appointments with me, face to face, to give me updates, to discuss the cases. And as a result, today, I'm able to sleep better. And I have a very simple assignment to do.
Okay.
Which is to fax to the office as soon as possible any legal documents if I receive any.
Well, I want to thank you, Betty. That was, very flattering, everything you said. And I'm glad that you insisted on, calling in and telling the world. Like I said before, it's difficult to, get our listeners to realize that this is legitimate stuff, and we're here to help. So if you're sitting in your car or you're listening on your radio, give us a call. 1-800-870-6507. That's 1-800-870-6507.
Betty, the Legal Corner wants to thank you for being here with us today. And if you have any last words for our listeners that might inspire them to defend themselves, please share.
I do. Listeners, please make the phone call. If I did not make that phone call, where would I be today? I would be out of my home.
Well said, Betty. And to our listeners, we want to reiterate the fact that you must make the initial call. You must choose to defend yourself. You must choose to educate yourself and try and figure out how you can stay in your home.
We're here answering, questions and taking calls, and it really starts on your end. If you're shy, you don't feel shy. If you think your question's stupid, it's not. Please. There is no such thing as a stupid question, and I say that from, deep down in my heart. There are no stupid questions. So if you're thinking about calling, just call me. I've got plenty of time to listen. And like Betty said, it's like as if I was speaking to her. Maybe that is the case. Maybe there's a reason why I'm talking to you right now, and you're listening on the other end. That's 1-800-870-6507. Now, that was client time. That was a new segment, and we'd like to continue that each week. If it's not a current client, maybe it's a caller from the previous episode, and we might go into a Q&A and discuss the things that we talked about. So keep that in mind, and maybe next time that'll be you on the other end.
Now for our next segment, Trench Warfare in the Courtroom. This is where both Brian and I will discuss different cases and how we've been able to assist homeowners. The first thing I would like to share with our listeners is this recent caller. We'll call her Betty. Betty is a client who I worked with over the last 6 months. She had a very interesting situation. She had both a home where she lived in, and she had a home that was an investment property, if you will, a rental property, as she calls it.
It's funny, you can't get modifications on investment properties.
Exactly. And what's funny is that she was being charged, 2 times she was charged for a modification on the rental property, being offered the HAMP, and yet the HAMP does not allow for premises that you don't live in.
So I guess rule number 1, if you have an investment property that you're renting out to people and you're trying to get a loan modification on it,
you won't qualify.
Don't qualify, don't try for it.
And it goes back to our golden rule here. Don't waste time. Unfortunately for Betty, she was misled. She was misguided. However, somehow Betty found us. She listened to our show. She called in. We immediately set appointments. The first thing we did for Betty was research the case. I personally went down to the courthouse, pulled the entire files, and went through the files. This is where it gets very interesting. For example, I found that on her rental property, the attorneys had sued but hadn't done anything for an entire year, not even putting in an affidavit of service. What was my reaction to that? Bingo. Went back to the office, drafted a motion to dismiss based on failure to prosecute. The attorney turned around and said, "Hey, you know what, attorney? Mr. Trujillo, can you allow me to pull my case out?" Because he knew that the judge was going to toss that case in the garbage. As far as the home that she lives in, we did a different type of motion where we showed that she had not been properly served, wherein she had not been properly notified about the case. In that regard, the attorneys for that office did the same exact thing. They knew that the service that they had performed, the delivering of the summons of complaint to Betty, was improper. They knew that they were not going to end up winning that foreclosure. They withdrew. At the end, Miss Betty, who had 2 homes, had spent so much money and wasted time, was still able to help herself. And interestingly enough, my partner Brian has had a very similar situation.
I did. Earlier this week, I received a offer of settlement from the bank attorneys. It's funny, I sent out discovery demands earlier on in the case. I wanted the note, the mortgage, assignments, as well as answers to interrogatories and other questions. I received a lot of documents back. I requested about 90-something documents from them, and they gave me about 30 of the 90. They objected to 60. I'm still going to fight for them and attempt to get them. They're in the end going to have to turn them over. They can't not. However, one thing that I did obtain was a copy of their note and mortgage, the client's note and mortgage, and the bank didn't have a case based on that note and mortgage. I served upon them a demand that they admit that the copy that I received from them with the note and the mortgage was a true original copy. They couldn't admit that because that would mean they didn't have a case. So they didn't respond properly to my demand that they admit. As a result, the court considers they admit it. It's an admission by virtue of their failure to answer.
Their failure to answer becomes an admission.
Yes. So now what happens is they admitted it. They knew they admitted it. They knew they messed up. They knew the case is over. They knew that I got them.
But they also couldn't lie to the court.
But they couldn't lie to the court. So instead of lying, they let it go. Now, come into work and first thing in the morning, open up my mail, and there is a settlement offer. All of a sudden, on my desk is an offer for a loan modification. I didn't submit a single document. I didn't go through the month upon month. Oh, here's my financing here's my financial statements. Here's my, bills. This is how much I make. Here are my taxes. Here's my profit and loss. None of that. They just straight out said, here, sign this and send it back and we'll enter into a modification. Now, it's great. Hey, I got the quickest modification agreement in this side of the East Coast. I mean, I don't know.
Easily.
I've never, but the thing is, I can't.
Without providing financial.
I mean, I'm going to have to tell my client, hey, it's your choice whether to take this or not. But at the end of the day, the reason they did this is because they can't foreclose. So now the client has the choice of getting a modification or continuing on and walking away from this.
So essentially what they were saying to you is,